So today we'll be looking at the earth officials, the stomach and spleen. And they're pretty interesting because they are the only pair that are talked about together, like very closely in chapter 8 of the Ling Shu. They're literally like stomach spleen. So even though they're two different officials, they are described in chapter 8 of the Ling Shu of the Neijing as one. So they're very, which really implies that their functions are very closely related. And interestingly enough, they both have very prominent yang and yin aspects to each of them. So there's a lot of yin aspects to the stomach, which is a fu, and there's a lot of yang aspects of the spleen, which is a zang. So looking at the earth, and you guys know, the basic correspondences of the earth. And there seems to be a lot of air traffic behind me, like helicopters and planes. So I don't know if you can hear me okay. Can you hear me okay? All right, yeah. Weirdly enough, I have an office that's like a couple miles from the airport, and I never hear planes, like never, not ever. I live in Colombia, and we live right under two routes, so I hear planes like every 3 minutes. It's kind of funny. So Earth CFs and Earth in general, if you think about the Earth that we live on, it's constantly rotating, it's constantly spinning. And at the equator, it's spinning roughly 1,000 miles an hour, just under 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, which is pretty fast. So we think about this, large planet as being kind of inert and stuck, but it's constantly in motion. It's constantly in rotation, which actually gives us the capacity to experience cycles of yin and yang. And it's not only in rotation, but it's in revolution around the sun, right? This golden yellow orb, which also is the color of Earth. So there's this quality of gravity in and of itself, and every body of mass has gravity, and there's a formula for that, which is pretty basic. Even each of you we're bodies of mass. Again, our gravitational force is quite weak, right? But it is there nonetheless. And then, as we're the microcosm of the Earth that we live on. And then the Earth rotates around the sun, revolves around the sun. And then the sun itself is on one arm of the solar system, is one arm of the galaxy that is supposedly revolves around, rotates and revolves around this supposed black hole in the center of our galaxy, which is also one of billions, as Carl Sagan would say, billions and billions of galaxies in the known universe. And who knows if there's more than one universe? We don't even know. So it's also interesting that the universe, as far as we can tell, is expanding. So there's really nothing inert about the Earth. So that's going to be one aspect of, how we contextualize people, our patients that show up, that resonate very closely with the Earth. There's going to be this quality around like what is their center, and how do they move around that center, and what aspect of themselves is the center, and are they the center of their life, right? Again, thinking about how the heart and the earth work together, how the fire and the earth work together to create this sense of yin and yang qualities of groundedness, order, centeredness, and control. And both of those carry those functions out by virtue of their individual shens, right? The heart shen allows us the capacity of awareness, and then the earth shen, the E, gives us the capacity to take that sense of awareness and focus it, almost like like the lens of an eyeglass, like to focus it on something that allows us to think about it, contemplate it, process it, and understand it, and then even with the help of the heart to communicate that to others outside of us. So the earth itself, the character for earth, basically shows like a basic line, which is the ground, and then there's another line above that, which is sort of like this sort of, that which is above the ground. So there's the soil and that which is above the ground, and then there's just a single line that comes up, which is everything that grows, that symbolizes everything that grows out of the ground. So it's almost like a plus sign with a wider line at the base. So it's very simple, and that in and of itself is a philosophical statement about the simplicity of earth. It simply nourishes the growth of all things, right? I don't have to go to any other planet to get asparagus. I don't have to go to any other planet in the solar system or in the known universe to get the nutrients I need that allows me to grow. And it is itself the source of that nourishment and that which all growth springs from, right? So it is the ground that provides stability and nourishment, as well as the mediumship of growth and development, and provides us, all that we need. So it's about, what do I need to grow and live? And then also, what do I need to be stable? What do I need to be like? I need something to plant my plants in, right? So that soil has to be firm. There has to be a certain density to it. And that's something that you may experience in a subtle way in the presence of some of your patients, this quality of density, this quality of gravity, this quality of groundedness. And then of course there's, what shows up as deficient and what shows up as excess, right? So deficient would be ungrounded, right? The soil is maybe poor quality or not enough soil, right? So there's little stability. So there's not much to nourish. There's not much there to grow, right? So someone may experience malnourishment physically or malnourishment in terms of like their spiritual and psychological sustenance, which is in the form of attention and care and thoughtfulness and sympathy in a way, like thought, people like concerned about you. And, are you contained, right? Because earth is the container. So if that's very deficient, it's very easily broken up. There maybe is not much there. So they show up as unsupportive, unthoughtful, unsympathetic, uncaring, because they don't have the chi to summon and bring forth to that, as well as they may not have the chi to power the E faculties of thoughtfulness. In a way, like sometimes your patients may come in and complain of feeling like empty-headed, like I just can't concentrate, right? The spleen banks the blood, it like maintains, it holds things in place. So it's almost like being able to hold a thought in place, right? So forgetfulness, or it just may not occur. We may be obtunded by damp, and on a psychological level that shows up as confusion or just an inability to think and process and to think of things, right? So it may not occur to you that, your best friend's birthday is coming up, or your anniversary is coming up, or some special date or something that needs to be taken care of, like, oh, I can never remember to put the recycling out, right? Monday night I got to do that. I can just never think, it just never occurs to me, like, oh, right, like these sort of experiences that we have where we're not able to just even summon our thoughts about something, our memories, our sense of awareness. There's sort of like the empty thought bubble, right? And then on an excess side, it might be excessively hard. So that may also show up as unsympathetic, but it's less of a, oh, it never occurred to me to be sympathetic, right? More on the deficient side, I think about people like some people who are like on the spectrum, like it just never really occurs to them that other people have needs or considerations or feelings. They're not being mean, they're not hard-hearted. It just doesn't really occur to them. It just doesn't even compute, right? Because there's just not enough soil there to sprout that thought. And then on the excess side, this would be people who are very hard. They know better. They know you have thoughts and feelings. They know you have concerns, and they're able to think through them, but they just don't care, right? This would be like sympathy reject. This would be like the soil is so hard and compacted and dense that nothing can really grow there, right? And what grows is like the seeds of our contentment, right? The seeds of our purpose and journey through life. So there's a quality of inertness and a quality of excessive gravity, right? So when it's deficient, it can actually kind of show up in two ways. One is like, it just doesn't even occur to me to think about others. Or on the flip side, they may not be able to, or they have some kind of story that interferes with their ability to focus on themselves and take care of their own needs. And so they get lost in the taking care of the needs of others. These would be like the Uber mothers that are like terrified of like their kids not getting enough, maybe because they never felt like they got enough, right? There's a nice example in the Hicks's book where this one patient is talking about like being like, I think they were like the third child of 10, right? And then, 18 months after she was born, the next kid was born. And then another 2 years after that, the next kid was born, and so on and so on. So like this person never got their needs, felt like they got their needs met or the attention that they were craving. And so when she had a daughter, she was sort of like smothering her, right? So this is all about a quality of density, containment, as well as a sense of like moving from the center to the periphery. It means from you out, as well as from the periphery to the center. And that's and that's sort of like this dance that people who resonate a lot with the earth experience. And sort of what's implicit in that conversation where, I give from myself to you, my thoughtfulness, my my concern, my care, my sympathy, my pity, my thoughtfulness, like, then there has to be some quality of boundary, right? Because if you give everything, then you have nothing for yourself. And if you hold on to everything for yourself, then you have like nothing really, there's no space to give anything. And then, so, what's the quality? And it's always going to be dynamic. What's the quality of these dynamic boundaries that the patient has with self and other? So, we all know that there's people who are very selfish, right? And we kind of use the term as a sort of a negative trait, but there's a quality. We all need to be to some degree selfish, right? When I'm hungry, I need to eat. When I'm tired, I need to rest, right? When I am restless, I need to move. So we all have certain needs for food, water, air, shelter, and the things that support our spirit, right? Which is these ineffable experiences, right? Which take time and chi. So that's not necessarily a negative thing, is to be selfish. And again, there's always this sort of dynamic interplay. How much do I give to others? How much do I give to myself? And this is where the earth's relationship to the heart's Shen, as well as the water kidneys Zhi will, comes into play to inform the where to draw that line. And again, the heart, it's masterful. The Supreme Controller is masterful at creating this spontaneous guidance for all the other officials about how to behave and how to function. And that's how it maintains order. It's constantly radiating out its decree, just like the sun is constantly radiating light, right? Even at night, we just can't see it, but we see it reflected in the moon and the stars. So similarly, there's a part of us that is always tuned in, especially the Zong, is always tuned into the decree of the heart. And so, again, considering the relationship between the blood and the different officials. So the heart governs the blood, right? Which means it infuses its Shen into the blood, almost like dissolving a gas into a liquid, right? It infuses the Shen into the blood at every heartbeat, which means it's a new moment, it's a new moment, it's a new moment, it's a new moment, da-dum, 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 right? It's a new day, it's a new moment, it's a new moment, it's a new moment, right? But the spleen banks the blood, contains the blood, and gives us, along with the liver, muscle memory. So the heart's going, it's a brand new moment, it's a brand new moment, it's a brand new moment, and infusing that compassion and joy and love and feeling of connection and oneness and unity with all things, right? The heart doesn't just share the blood with just these special organs, and well, I don't really care so much about the arms and the gallbladder. Well, you know, I don't. No, the heart doesn't discern. It's every cell gets blood and Shen, right? And so, just like every saint and sinner alike gets the sunlight and the moonlight and the starlight. So, but the spleen gives us the capacity to think and process, right? Because the heart, there's no discernment. It's just like, I love everybody. I love everyone. There's room for everyone in my life, right? I can radiate my Shen to everybody. But then the spleen says, well, you know, when I was 6, my dad really like messed me over, like my dad really hurt my feelings. Or, when I was 10, my mom, or for these like many years, my mom just like smothered me to death. And I have a memory of that. So it may be a new moment, but I'm still remembering that pretty acutely. And I'm holding that in my flesh. Maybe I'm not quite so ready to let that go because I have thoughts about the moment. Right? So the spleen and the stomach allow us to kind of like eat our life and then process our life. Just like we, I have a peach, I see the peach, I smell the peach, I taste the peach, I chew up the peach, I swallow the peach, I process the peach, and then I transport the essences of the peach to all 4 corners of my kingdom. And then I use the really best parts of the peach, and then the unusable parts of the peach I let go of, right? So that takes time, right? It's not like see peach, eat peach, poop what's not the peach, right? Like that doesn't happen. Yes, Guangzhou. Yes.
I thought about other opportunities. In that way, I'm the peach. Peach is me.
Yes. Nice.
All the nutritions become me.
Yes. Exactly. But that takes time. So the yi, to process the moment, like the heart just goes, yes, right? But the spleen, stomach are like, I hear your yes. I'm going to think about that. Maybe not. I don't know. Right? And so this is why you'll notice one of the ways you can kind of tune into the quality of the earth in someone is the way they process information. Some people, again, may take too big a bite, right? They may take in a lot of information, and it's like tough to chew on that. So it takes a long time to process. And again, we have what's, the memory gives us a sense of what's familiar. We seek the familiar because the familiar is relatively safe, because we know kind of how to deal with it, even if it's awful, right? So, one of the things that shows up is, how does this person like receive nourishment? How do they process nourishment? Does it support their feelings of stability and fullness and contentment? Does it assist and support their mental clarity, right? Because again, the stomach and spleen do deal with the turbid, right? The stomach takes the turbid along with the small intestine and ascends it up, to help create the blood and to create the Wei Qi immune system. So it's not like the turbid isn't useful, but can everything be processed relatively easily and thoroughly, so that we have this sense of clarity, right? Because what's the opposite of that? That would be dampness, right? But again, we have the yin and the yang. We have the thin fluids and the thick fluids, right? We have the fluids around the eye and we have the fluids in the eye, right? So we've got the thick and the thin, the turbid and the clear. But even the turbid should be manageable. It should not weigh us down. It should not obtund us and obscure our ability to be present, right? And a really dramatic, extreme example of that would be phlegm misting the mind, where a person is literally unable to receive and think about reality clearly at all, to the point where they're crazy. Like we would consider them to be insane, like a schizophrenic, or someone with like a personality disorder. Yeah. So, and then once that's ingested, like, do we then, so then when we kind of like then give back out, right? Because everything is about going in and then going out. Then when we communicate with others and when we give to others, are we giving in a way that can be received? And when we can, and when we do, we feel understood, right? When I speak and share my mental process, is that received well? And if it is, then I feel understood. I feel supported, right? Yeah. So some of the main themes that show up with people that resonate with the earth are this quality, this dynamic quality and ease of giving and receiving, right? Because the stomach needs to be empty, the mouth needs to be empty, right? I can't take another bite if my mouth is still full, right? I'm still chewing and chewing and chewing, right? And actually just a few weeks ago, I think, well, actually it's on July 4th, I think. So it was about 3 weeks ago, Nathan's hot dog eating contest, and this one dude, Joey Chestnut, I think is his name. He's been the winner like year after year after year after, and the guy's like, he's built like me. He's like pretty thin. This dude ate something like 60 some hot dogs in a minute, or like, no, 60 some hot dogs in several minutes. I can't remember exactly the time they give him. Maybe, I don't know. But it was like not a long period of time. And he ate like 60, and he like constantly holds the record. But like, he's just like shoving all this food, and you can't go through life like that. Like you can have a once a year event like that. We would call that like a Jeffrey UN workshop. But you can't eat like that every time. I mean, like we would just explode. So there's this quality of like giving and receiving, and the sense of ease of like, what's the appropriate amount to give? What's the appropriate amount to receive and take in? How is that processed? Do we get a sense of contentment with it? Or do we feel unnourished or undernourished? or satisfied or dissatisfied, right? Supported, unsupported. And then in sort of like sort of involved in that dynamic is a sense of boundaries, right? I can't think of the word in English, but like sort of included in that is this quality of boundaries. So Mazzy Star in the early 90s had this great song called Fade Into You, where she just kind of like, you know, she's singing about like being so into this guy that she kind of loses herself, right? So like a lot of parents end up doing this. They sort of live vicariously through their kids, right? They throw their whole being into the well-being of the kid, or you might consider like codependent relationships, where it's all about the partner and their happiness and to make sure they're satisfied and they're understood and their needs are met. I can't remember, there was a Julia Roberts movie with John Cusack that came out, I think a while back in the early 2000s, where she's the sister of like this famous movie star, played by the woman that married Michael Douglas and then divorced Michael Douglas. She's got black hair. Anyway, like everything was about like taking care of her drama queen older sister, who was like a famous actress, right? And her needs never got met. So we all have these, you know, and we all to some degree have had an experience of this where we were either with someone that like they made their whole life about us, or we kind of get lost in something, a topic, an interest, a person, right? We kind of lose ourselves. We lose our stability, right? Because if I give too much, I become unstable. If I receive too much, I become too stuck and I can't move, right? So that's a big theme that shows up. So the amount that I give, the amount that I receive, my ability to give and receive, again, combined with the heart's wisdom and awareness and sense of spontaneity, like and appropriately, propriety, right? Can I appropriately give the right amount, receive the right amount, right? Can I learn to figure that out? Am I giving away too much chi and depleting myself? Am I hoarding too much and becoming like damp and phlegmy, right? Which makes me more stuck. What's the quality of my thinking, and what's the quality of the boundaries that show up in my life? So these are sort of the main things. Really briefly, I'll give you an example and then I'll go into the officials. I have this one patient. She's definitely an earth-CF and she's so interesting. And we usually go through this 5-minute or several minute dance of making sure that she's comfortable on the table. So I've got it pretty memorized, like how she likes things, but it's never quite right. Oh, could you just fluff up the pillow a little more? Oh, could you move that over this way? Could you put something under my wrist? Oh, that, no, could you take it back out? No, could you put it back in? Oh, could you use the other towel? Oh, okay, thanks, right? And she'll say something and I'll be like, okay, if I'm hearing you correctly, blah, blah, blah. And I literally wrote down exactly what she said, word for word. I recited it back to her, word for word. She's like, that's not quite it. So like, there's just no, like she cannot feel understood. She says XYZ, I say XYZ. She's like, no, that wasn't quite it. Right. And these are people that will do everything they can to generate their own obstacles to their own satisfaction. And you will, if you're not really careful and paying attention, you will get sucked into this game of try and solve my problem. Because you'll make a suggestion because you're kind and you're thoughtful and you're smart. And they'll go, oh, that won't work. Or, oh, I tried that. And they never really tried that. And then you'll make another suggestion. Oh, that won't work because of XYZ. You know, that won't work. Now I did that, but you know, it didn't turn out. And you'll get sucked into this dynamic. So you just have to stop. And you have to say, you know, I think you need to trust your own thoughtfulness and your own intelligence to be able to to really figure out, what's the best for your needs. Because the moment you start being like the shell answer man, or like the one who's gonna figure it out, oh, you'll just lose. You'll lose. They'll never let you solve their issue. Never, ever. Or they might even say, well, that sounds like a good idea. And then they'll come back the next week. Oh, I tried that and it didn't work. But they didn't try it. Or there's some reason that like it won't work. Like you have the perfect herb formula for them. Oh, I'm worried it'll interact with my blood pressure. No, I've checked all the herbs. It's not going to interact with your blood pressure. Well, I don't know. It just feels like it might. I'm like, no, it really won't. Well, I don't know. I mean, I take so much now as it is. I have the solution for your problem. No, it just it just doesn't seem right. Yeah, you'll forget it. So there's no you have to really like be mindful of that, of like sort of getting sucked into that dynamic with your patients. All right, any questions about the earth in general before we go into the stomach? Okay. So again, in the Ling Shu, the stomach and spleen are kind of put together, right? They are responsible for the storehouses and granaries, and the 5 tastes stem from them. So what does this mean? This means that they both have a quality of holding something, right? Just like gravity holds the center. And that is in charge of like that which nourishes us, right? So this would be like the grain silo, the hay barn, the place where, the shed where you dry your meat, right? In the old days, right? The smoke shed where you dry out your meat and store the meat. This would be like your root cellar, your pantry, right? So things are meant to be put in and things are meant to be taken out and used. And I think we've all had that can of creamed corn that stays in the pantry for like 5 years. I'm not, yeah, well, I might use it someday, well, and then back it goes and it just sits there, right? Generating its own little mini gravity that makes things stuck and takes up that space that would otherwise be better used, with your hearts of palm or something, you know what I mean? Like, so there's this sense of like something gets put in, something gets taken out, something gets put in, something gets taken out, and only that which is usable, right? So like, if you want to get in touch with your earth, like go into your pantry and look at the stuff that you haven't used in a while and think about like, am I willing to get rid of this? And the degree of which you have an appropriate amount of damp in your body will determine your willingness to get rid of something that you don't want. And again, this is like the Yang Ming, right? Yeah, right? The Tai Yin and the Yang Ming work together, like, because you want to be able to take the breath in, but you don't want to just hold your breath, right? You have to let it go, right? I loved my burrito, but eventually I do want to move my bowels. You know what I mean? Like, right?
Yeah, one time I check on my email is over 2,000.
Right, right. I really think that there's some quality of like either like earth or metal CFs that like you look in their inbox and like if it's over 1,000, that's damp. That's damp. Right. But then you got like the overactive metal CFs that go in, like every 15 minutes, like, clearing their browser history, getting rid of like the old emails, like, I don't hoard anything. Oh, that's got like the tiniest little bit of hole in my sock. Yeah, I'm throwing it away. Like, like I haven't used this in a month. Okay, it's gone, right? It's almost sterile, right? So that's why the metal and the earth work together to create the right amount of turbidity and the right amount of clarity, right? Because all the organs need to be there needs to be a certain little bit of damp and moisture, right? Like I don't want my lungs to be too dry. I don't want the lining of all of my food, especially the large intestine, to be too dry, right? There has to be a little bit of fluidity and moisture. My sinuses, if they get overly dry, they get susceptible to irritation and heat and wind heat. If they're overly damp, then there's the accumulation of phlegm and then I can't breathe, right? And I get that heavy-headed feeling. And then it's hard to concentrate, right? You know, I mean, you've all had like a cold or a flu when you're just like a giant phlegm ball. It's hard to think, right? Because that's that damp phlegm obtunding the mind. So there's this sort of like interesting dynamic balance between, you know, dampness and turbidity and dryness and clarity. And the Tai Yin and the Yang Ming work together to make that happen, which is mediated by the amount of moisture, because all of them deal with the fluids to some degree, as well as to what degree of dryness and to what degree of purity and impurity, right? Like I do want to have a certain amount of moisture coating my sinuses, but I don't want it to be the same moisture I had in 1985. You know what I mean? Like, so I may need to rinse my sinuses, but then you got the people who are like obsessed about rinsing their sinuses and then they end up drying themselves out. Right. All right. So the stomach is, again, responsible for the storehouse and granaries. The 5 tastes stem from them. So it allows us to experience the tastes, which are the essences of all 5 elements, which is represented on the material plane as the 5 flavors. So when the earth is doing its job, we're able to experience the essences of all the officials and all the elements. So in the old days, you had fire, south was at the top, water, north was at the bottom, wood in the east, right? And then metal in the west. And then what was holding the center was the earth. So it governs these transitions, right? Winter transforms into spring, which transforms into summer, which transforms into fall, and then transforms back into winter. So this quality of cyclicalness, this quality of rotation means everything comes around, everything is in motion, so everything changes, but that change has to, there has to be a center to that that creates the stability in the dynamic, right? So like when you're on a bicycle, if you move too fast, you become unbalanced. If you move too slow, it's hard to remain upright. There's this quality of circular movement that ends up being just right, so you're balanced. So transitions have to be balanced, movement has to be balanced, stillness has to be balanced. And there's this qualitative sense of processing. And again, if something is in motion in a wheel, you've got centripetal forces and centrifugal forces, right? So you've got the force of things pushing it out to the periphery, right? The force moves out the spokes to the end of the wheel. And then as well as a force moving inwardly back towards the center, right, of where the axle would be. And that is all governed by the earth. So I need to take something into my center, which then gets transformed and then transported back out to the periphery, right? I want to make sure my fingertips and my nails get the benefit of my burrito, right? But I have to eat the burrito first. I have to take the burrito into my center, then it gets transformed, then it gets transported. So center, periphery, periphery, center. And so that's how the spleen and the stomach work together, as well as ascension and descension. Holding the center, rising things up, letting go of the center, moving things down, right? Rising and falling. And that all requires this relationship with a center that generates stability. So what shows up in terms of the themes of the stomach is I'm either so full that I can't take anything in because I haven't been able to process what I've got, or I'm processing so fast, right? This is like excess yang. This would be like stomach heat, right? Because if you got stomach cold, nothing gets transformed, nothing gets chewed up, nothing gets processed. The 100-degree soup isn't made, right? 100 degrees is code word for hot, right? So if it's too cold, or if I have too little stomach acid, my digestion is sluggish, and then my stomach stays full for a long time, so I don't want to eat. So there's no more room for anything new, right? Same thing psychologically. If I'm overwhelmed with data and ideas and thoughts, right? Especially from the past, right? Stomach, spleen, stomach banks the blood. If I can't process my thoughts, if I can't process my past, there's no room for anything new. And if there's no room for anything new, I can't take in that which nourishes me on a daily basis. That's stomach cold, right? That's a stomach yang deficiency. Stomach yin deficiency is excess heat burning up the fluids, and I can't, so I'm over processing things too fast, so I can't really get all of the goods from my burrito. I only get some of the burrito, and then it moves through me so fast that I don't really get nourished by it. So then I feel very hungry. That's that insatiable quality of stomach heat, right? Excess yang. I'm processing it so fast, I don't have time to really get the goods, to absorb, receive, take in, hold on to all of the goods. And so there's a quality of fast moving. So in the former, things move slowly, barely at all. So this is where people feel very stuck. And then on a psycho-emotional level, this might be excessive rumination, even moving into like, what do you call it? Obsession, paranoia. Again, combining with the cold of the water and the kidney, like, you know, this sort of obsessive fear takes hold, right? And then, you know, because fire isn't able to feed the earth enough. And so things get bogged down and stuck. So people get really stuck in these routines. There's no change. There's no dynamism. They can't give, they can't receive. There's no room for anything. So nothing changes, right? Earth can't, there's no room for earth to be controlled by wood. It rejects everything. So these people feel very inert in life. You know, if there's like excess heat in the stomach, then everything gets processed so fast, they're completely insatiable. So it's almost like there's this sort of feeling of emotional or intellectual starvation. They're constantly craving more from people. They're constantly craving more information, more data, more sympathy, right? When it's cold and inert, they can't receive any sympathy. That's sympathy reject. There's no space. It's hard. It's overly full. They're already about to burst, right? They can't take another bite of life. And so on a spirit level, you know, the former, where it's like there's a lot of inactivity of the stomach and an inability to receive, an inability to process. These are people that can often feel very cold, uncaring. They have nothing to really, they feel like they have nothing to give. And they almost feel like when you're talking to them that like they don't really understand you very, very clearly. And I don't mean the small intestine confusion. I mean, like, they just don't even understand. Whereas like the excess stomach heat, you know, the overabundance of yang in the stomach that's exuberant, that may show up as impatient. Oh yeah, I got you figured out already. Never mind. We're on to the next thing. You know? And so they're processing so fast that they think they understand, but they're not really able to get all of the goods, all of the understanding that comes from thinking about something. So in order to save time, they often jump to conclusions or rely on stereotypes. I had a friend for a few years in New York. He was a really interesting guy. I've since lost touch with him, but I mean, you basically would say like 10 words to this guy. And he's like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand. And, you know, you tell him like your like where, like what country your family is, you know, from, like your nationality. And he's got you figured out. Like, oh yeah, I've got like, oh yeah. So yeah, your dad's Italian. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Okay. Yeah, you're this way. And I'm like, no, actually I'm not that way. He's like, yeah, you are. I'm like, no, you really don't understand it. This is like the the people that have these like sort of like bumper sticker level understanding of things, you know. I think about like certain politicians that, you know, just show either a calculated or like a calculated like desire to not understand, to like sort of maintain a certain agenda, or they just seriously don't know how to think through things. And you'll recognize it by like, how many bumper stickers does this train of thought fit on? You know, 1 to 2, yeah, okay. Right. I once came across this website that had a t-shirt. They were selling funny t-shirts, and it said in this really nice cursive script, stereotypes are a real time saver. All right. So
is that real quick, is that a unnatural okay, like I'm thinking templates in
yes,
you're putting
yes,
in their heads, and they see it as time saver
yes,
thing,
yeah,
and can they get to a certain point where they become stale and that becomes their
yeah,
only go-to?
yep, yep,
So,
yep. These are people who probably eat the same thing like every week, like Monday's pizza night, Tuesday's hot dog night, you know, Wednesday's hamburger night, you know, Thursday's quiche night, you know, like, or they probably wouldn't eat a quiche, but you know, like it's like that where it's a very like simple way of thinking, right? Earth out of balance, they really don't have the capacity to process nuance, right? Their life is not a mixture of many flavors, just 1 or 2, because that's all they can process, you know. And they're also the ones that are like really into like your ancestry in terms of like your blood. Well, that was good enough for my dad, so it's good enough for me. Well, do you want to think that through? Is it really good for you? Right. So again, there's this quality of like stuckness versus movement versus excessive movement. So for example, when I eat my burrito, I do eventually want to move my bowels. I don't want to move my bowels and have diarrhea in 10 minutes. That's movement, but that's excessive, unstable movement. I also don't want to like move my bowels in 3 days to get rid of my, you know, as much as I love the burrito, I really don't want to hold on to it for 3 days. Right? It's movement, but it's slow movement, and it's hard and compacted and dry, right? So this is where like also, and what's the quality of my breathing? Like, can I take a full deep breath based on the amount of moisture in my lungs? If it's overly dry, it's hard to take a full breath. If it's overly wet and damp, it's hard to take a full breath, right? So the fluids, the yin-yang, as well as the qi, and to some degree the blood, factor very heavily in the functioning of the spleen stomach. So things that, relate to the chi aspects are about a quality of energy level and the quality of efficient, timely, appropriate processing, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, for example, my wife can process emotions extremely quickly. I'll come back like the next day and go, oh yeah, okay, now I'm clear, right? Like I have to sleep on it. She's figured it out in like 47 seconds. You know what I mean? Like but she's an RCF and she processes that stuff fast, right? Me, I'm like, I don't know. let me feel into this a bit, let me think about it a while, right? So one quality about like that stomach shows up a great deal is like the quality of energy level and the quality and nature of processing on a body, mind, spirit level. And to what degree of clarity shows up in the processing process, in the process of processing, right? So emotionally, this would be like, do I feel stuck in this emotion? Do I sort of leapfrog over it way too fast and then I don't really get the goods from it? So like if I have an experience that's unpleasant, even in like the worst experience, there's always some nugget of nourishment to be had from it, right? There's always something out of it that will serve me. I might want to let go of 90% of it, but there's always going to be a little percentage of that which will nourish my growth and stability and support me. So but if I process it too fast, then I miss that. If I process it too slowly, I'm not really able to absorb it fully, and I may hold on to too much of the waste. And then on a spirit level, to what degree am I open to receive? And to what degree am I willing to really process something and think about it? Like, oh, I don't want to think about it. Like people that are like that, they never get the goods of anything, and they stay stuck in a cycle because they never get to fully process the experience, which allows them to actually let go of what doesn't serve and to hold on to what does serve. But no, that doesn't taste right. Like or it doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, doesn't taste right. I'm not even going to let it in. I'm not even going to take it in. Right. Right. I mean, how many of you were like, as kids, your parents are trying to get you to eat something that you've never had before? Right. I don't know. I mean, because like in my experiences, in terms of food or experiences, like the kid, they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like, I don't want to do that. And then they go and they do it. That was the best day ever. Right. Right. At first they were like, the heels completely dug in. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. They finally eat it and they're like, oh, that was pretty good. They're like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Like you take them there, they kind of suffer through it. And then they have like the best time of their week. So, there's this quality of infusion of maturity by the fire that feeds the stomach and the spleen that gives us the capacity to be open and receive things that we've never seen, smelled, or tasted before. Right? And that's how we grow. Right? I'm not gonna grow as big as Melvin if I'm just eating baby food for the rest of my life from Gerber's. You know what I mean? Like, nope. The kid refuses to eat anything else. I liked my creamed spinach. That's it. That's all. That's all I'll take in. Right? Kid's not going to grow. Right? All right. Let's take a 14-minute break. We'll come back at 10 after 10, and then we'll continue with the spleen. All right, so we're going to continue with the spleen, and then we'll recap both of them. So just as the stomach receives and transforms everything into the 100-degree soup, right? Which allows us then to absorb what's useful and then transport by the spleen's chi to all of the goods, all of the vitamins and minerals and essences to all four corners of the kingdom, right? So it's about transporting and distributing the chi, the blood, the nourishment, as well as help assisting in the wastes, right? Think about lymph, right? This sort of like the earth and the metal working together. And right, so it's sort of represented, the exterior is represented by the lips, right? So it takes, the earth takes it in, it processes, and then brings it out. Like, you can sort of, one way of looking at the health of the earth is by virtue of the quality of the lips and the tongue. And then on the interior, that would be the quality of the flesh. That is the form, sort of like the outer shape. If you were to look at somebody like in silhouette, what would be their form, their shape, right? So the spleen, through its role in producing the chi and the blood, it integrates into our being the products that it gets from the stomach official. And what's really interesting is that the spleen and the stomach have this really fascinating yin-yang complementary relationship, whereby many of the functions seem to be sort of have a reverse polarity. So the stomach is a yang fu, the spleen is a yin zhang, but the stomach is the origin of the fluids, which is yin. The spleen has the functions of transporting and moving and distributing the essences in the forms of qi and blood, and that's a yang function. Spleen qi is said to ascend, that's yang. Stomach qi is said to descend, that's yin. The spleen is yin, but it likes dryness. And the stomach is yang, but it likes a little bit of wetness. So that's kind of interesting. And interestingly enough, the stomach is the only yang channel on the anterior aspect of the body. That's pretty unusual. The spleen never really suffers from yin deficiency, but often suffers from a yang deficiency or a qi deficiency, and qi is yang. And then the stomach, which is more yang, more often than not, suffers from a yin deficiency. So it's really interesting. So the spleen governs the postnatal qi. It assists in the digestion and the production of the qi in blood, right? Which is therefore tonifying. So if you want to tonify qi in blood, you have to nourish the spleen and to some degree the stomach. And it helps resolve, along with the stomach, the retention of any kind of dampness that then results in qi stagnation and edema and fluid stagnation, right? So it's also said to control the blood by keeping it in its proper place. Remember, so like spleen hopes to, like that provides the more yin aspect of the earth's function of holding something in place, maintaining the center. And this relates to the quality of integrity, which is often attributed to the earth. So on a physical level, you want to be walking along the earth and not falling into the earth or flying off into space, right? By virtue of its gravity, it keeps us contained, held to the ground. But similarly, we don't want the ground to be opening up and what do you call it? When something kind of gives way beneath our feet, right? We want the integrity of the earth to be solid and firm. I don't want to be like sinking into mud, right? I don't want to be walking along and all of a sudden, boof, I fall into a hole and I fall, 100 feet into the earth, right? So the earth maintains its integrity and therefore it's reliable. And this is another quality of the earth on a psycho-emotional and spirit level, one of integrity and reliability. And it's interesting how that relates to the E intention, YI intention, which is like the virtue of the spleen, stomach. And I see this mostly a lot with like people who resonate more with the spleen. I'm not really sure why, but the character for E basically shows or is sort of defined as or interpreted as, excuse me, the intention of one who speaks manifested by the sound that he or she utters, and by extension, the meaning that the intelligence of the hearer perceives in the words of the speaker. So basically, do you say what you mean, and do you mean what you say? Is that reliable, right? And can you count on someone to do what they say what they'll do, right? Because if they're doing that, then they are nourishing and supporting, you know, all the parties involved. The E, which is housed by the spleen, right? The Shen is all of an element is always housed, or sort of like, I would say maybe like generates through its healthy functioning. The E of the spleen gives us the capacity for thought and intention, right? E is like according to Jarrett, like in his book Nourishing Destiny, right? Was it Nourishing Destiny or maybe Clinical Practice? I can't remember. Maybe it was Clinical Practice. The E constitutes the digestive aspect of the mind that empowers us to seek out and effectively integrate life's experiences that are congruent with nourishing our original purpose. So basically, do we have a taste for those things in life which nourish us and help us to integrate our experiences in a way that helps us to experience satisfaction, contentment, and stability, right? It allows us to process and integrate our experiences in a way that nourishes us, a way that gives us energy, in a way that gives us a sense of fullness, fulfillment, right? Fulfillment, contentment, satisfaction. And that gives us the energy to then give out our chi, right? To serve others through our thoughtfulness, through our care and concern for the world around me. But it has to be in alignment with the heart, right? It has to be in alignment with the heart. And it has to be infused with the heart's Shen of awareness that gives us the capacity to be appropriate in our giving and receiving, right? We don't want to give too much. We don't want to hoard too much. So the spleen is generally impaired by a deficiency of qi, which can either be from an external ingestion of dampness, like maybe I just eat nothing but like fried chicken, you know, all day, you know, like fast food, Chick-fil-A. Maybe I live on Chick-fil-A, right? Maybe, and then like with spicy sauce, right? So now I get damp heat, and that obtuns the flow of qi and blood, and that creates stagnation. And that stagnation over time creates a deficiency as well. So qi deficiency will show up. And then if like the qi stagnates and the blood stagnates and the fluid stagnates chronically, then we have phlegm, and that generates more cold. So then we have a deficiency of yang qi, right? And if we're not getting the gu qi that we need, then the kidneys suffer. And so kidney yang qi plus spleen qi deficiency equals, you know, spleen yang qi deficiency, right? And that's from, you know, like what we're eating and drinking, and so that's internally generated damp, right? Or my mind gets fixated on something, and I just go round and round and round and round, and that impairs the flow of qi and the quality of functioning of my spleen stomach together, and then that creates internal damp. And then one more way the earth functionings get impaired, especially the spleen, is the wood emotions of chronic frustration and anger will over time weaken the spleen stomach. It'll just become so excessive, and that chi will stagnate so much and generate over time so much heat that it transversely moves across, right? Doesn't go up, create high blood pressure, migraines, headaches, dizziness, tinnitus. It doesn't go down, which creates a lot of like chronic, like diarrhea, also can be dizziness, reproductive issues, inflammation of the genital region. Then it goes across and then over controls the earth, the spleen stomach. And so you get a lot of like bloating, a lot of distension, maybe even acid reflux, regurgitation. And then that chi stagnation of the liver and gallbladder can then lead to more dampness generated by the spleen. Okay. So as you've probably understood, like the biggest enemy of the spleen is damp, right? So damp of the body is excessive fried foods, greasy foods, fatty foods, what we would call rich foods, right? I think about James Gandolfini, who played Tony Soprano. Maybe you guys have heard of that or not. But he was a pretty overweight dude and was kind of excessive in his habits. And he ate a lot of really rich food. And I think he eventually suffered a cardiac arrest because he was just like, eating so much foie gras and food and wine and stuff like that. He, basically contributed to an early death, right? Because again, thinking about that excessive buildup of damp, that's what clogs your arteries. That's what clogs your veins, right? So the heart has to work really hard. On a mental level, this gives us the capacity to feel grounded and stable. Again, to be thoughtful, but there's more of there's more of an emphasis on like less emphasis on processing, which is more stomach, and more emphasis on like containing, right? Like you could say stubbornness, but I would say like the ability to hold fast to your integrity, the ability to remain stable, not stuck, but remain stable and grounded and centered in your values. What is integrity to you, right? To say what you mean, to mean what you say. If you say something, you'll do it, right? If you do something, you'll mean it, right? This is the capacity to be, to remember, right? Because a certain amount of thoughtfulness means like, you've kept someone in your mind and in your heart. So you remember those special dates. You see that someone is suffering. So maybe you take the extra time like to visit somebody in the hospital, and then you maybe even take like a little extra time to like make them something nice or pick up some flowers or a balloon or a stuffed animal. You know what I mean? Like, it's the little thoughtful things that require a certain capacity for memory and concentration, right? So if you're studying for a test, like you want to put a little press tack into spleen 2, right? The tonification point to the spleen, right? You got a little press tack in there, and then you study and you'll retain that better, right? So there's a quality of intention. Again, the spleen is connected to the heart in the meridian clock cycle, right? And then via the tie-in, it's connected to the lungs. So with the spleen, there's this sort of integrity and thoughtfulness that's a little bit inspiring, right? That is inspired, that they allow themselves, they can sort of be inspired to use the chi and use their chi to offer something that's very thoughtful and very directed. Like they're the ones that like really know how to give the perfect gift, like because they really understand the recipient. They've taken them in almost like they've taken in their essence and really understood the essence of the other person, right? And that takes time, it takes attention, and it takes chi. And it has to stick, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I forgot it was our anniversary. Yeah, what's her favorite flower? I can't remember, right? That's a deficient spleen, right? And the spleen works with the lungs to generate the chi from above, to receive the chi from above, and to receive the chi from within, right? Or from the earth, that's from the stomach, right? From what we eat, right? Which comes up out of the ground, right? You know, it's not like asparagus falls from the sky, I catch it, you know, it's not like that. Like, right? There's no heavenly food, right? The air, that's the heavenly food, right? Photons from the sun, that's heavenly food. But that's light, that's essential, right? That's like essency, right? So the lungs take in the subtle, the spleen takes in from the stomach the gross or the dense, right? And together they work together to generate the fluids, the blood, the jinye, and the chi that nourish us and give us the capacity to utilize our jing and to connect to our shen. So we take things in and then we give things back out. We go out and do work. We are of service. We are thoughtful in our doing and giving in the world. So we need to contribute something in the world. You can't be satisfied inside yourself unless you are giving something away in some way. Even if it's to like a pet dog, you know what I mean? Like everybody needs to care for something or you're really nobody. And so that old saying is right when it says, you ain't no bunny till somebody loves you, and you ain't no bunny till you love somebody, right? You guys ever heard that little nursery rhyme? But like, if you're just for yourself, then your life is meaningless, right? There's no one to receive from, there's no one to give to, there's no satisfaction in that. It's safe, but oh my God, is it boring? And it's so unnourishing, right? And again, that chi from the spleen stomach rises up, that turbidity rises up, like that which is like not so perfect and clear rises up, and actually, ironically, is what nourishes the heart the most. So it's not the perfect, it's the kind of messy stuff that really gives meaning to our life, right? In a way, like to really understand someone and to have someone understand you is to let them in and to share your mistakes, to share your foibles, to share your flaws, right? To share the things that, like, you know, these goofy things that you've done in the past or mistakes. That really helps people to understand you. Because if they just see this like perfect, you know, lung person, you know, like it's not that interesting. You know, there's no substance to them, right? So it's the kind of the messy stuff. And so this is something that shows up a lot with like spleen CFs who they really want to be understood. Like the stomach CFs, they really want to be nourished. They really want to receive and they really want to give. But the spleen, that's more yin. They really want to like have fond memories. They really want to be understood. They really want to understand others, right? They want, and that's how they experience a sense of integrity in the world. Like, there's a quality of like coming homeness that's really important to them. And then they need to feel at home in the spacesuit that we rent for however many years we're on the planet, that we need to feel at home in our home, right? My wife is like the quintessential Earth CF, man, and she's an interior designer, right? So like I joke with people, she has a PhD in HGTV, right? And she is about making our home homey, right? Like, oh, I can come and rest here. So like, that's the spleen, right? I want to settle. I want to be stable. I want to be supported. I want to be held. I want to be nurtured. You know, they're not the ones going out like, let's go parachute jumping, you know, like, no, you know, right. There's this funny meme somebody sent me. It's like there's this little cat. There's like this gray cat looking at the camera. Like they're reading their email. Like, you know, my friends invite me out on a Saturday night. And then there's like the next picture of the cat, like me on a Saturday night. And the cat is completely swaddled in this blanket, you know, like, you know, completely like totally like held and contained in this big comfy blanket with just the face showing. Like that's an earth CF. That's a spleen CF right there, you know, like they've got their food within arm's reach. They got their drink with a straw in arm's reach. They got the remote control, you know, playing their game, and they're in it like a big hoodie on a, you know, with their like favorite socks on the couch, you know, with like the blanket wrapped up, like in their favorite soft clothes. So spleens, like, they like to be comfortable, man. They really, really like to be comfortable. Stomachs, like, yeah, it's okay. But spleens, man, they want their body to be really comfortable, and they want to really be understood. Like they want you to like really get them, you know? And in a way, like when you understand somebody, you can contain them, right? And they can rely on you. You provide integrity for them. So the spleens generally tend to be a little bit more grounded, and oftentimes can be more stuck. Stomach out of balance tends to like either under process or over process. So there's a lot of like, and again, you know, thought is more yang, feelings are more yin, right? Chi is more yang, blood is more yin. So the stomach is more about like processing, doing or not doing, processing or not processing, or over processing, you know, doing too much, doing too little, right? Chi moving too excessively or counterflow, or not moving enough. So there's a lot of stagnation. But like yin, that's more the blood. They feel things more, right? They're a little bit slower to process and more about how it feels. Is it comfortable? Is it satisfying? Right? Is it nourishing? Right? That's the spleen tends to resonate a lot more with that in terms of like the more yin aspects of things, right? The more yin substances, right? The blood, the fluids, which gives us a sense of solidness, right? Yeah, like the stomach people, like they don't need to feel so solid. And in fact, you'll see like a lot of stomach folks tend to be a lot more thin, and they seem to look a lot more like skin and bone and not a lot of flesh shape, right? Like if you took a snapshot of them and you just sort of like colored them in like all one color, like to separate them from the background, the silhouette would be a little bit more angular, not as curvy. Spleens are a little bit more curvy, more fleshy. Now, again, there's excess and deficiencies, right? So stomach excess, you know, they won't have a lot of shape, but there's a lot of shape in the middle. So they might be pretty thin, but they've got like a big middle. Whereas like the spleen, they might be more like pear-shaped. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And then the muscles might not have a lot of tonicity to it in deficiency for spleen and stomach, right? The flesh doesn't have a lot of shape. Or, you know, if there's a lot of stagnation for the spleen types, it can get very rounded and they look sort of swollen and edemic everywhere, right? There may look like their face is kind of puffy. Their skin looks a little like soggy, like almost like somebody like stuck a tube in them and kind of like inflated them a little bit. So they look sort of like, or maybe like filled with a little bit like more fluid than they should. And their skin will feel like really almost soggy. Yeah. Let me think. Okay. So I just wanted to mention a little word about guilt. Guilt can be thought of as a collapse of yang. So from the standpoint of Earth, it can have a relatively existential quality to it, like their whole, like it kind of takes over their life to some degree. Like, and it's usually about these sort of like grander issues, like raising a child, taking care of a dependent, like an animal or a baby. It has a lot to do with how we feel about ourselves, in terms of like our integrity, our thoughtfulness, our caring, right? Our concern for others. So, you know, it might be around like, I didn't give my kid enough, or I overly smothered my kid, or I didn't really put my whole heart and chi into this. I just kind of like mailed it in. And they kind of go through life a lot like that. And so they haven't really nourished others. They've had a very selfish existence, or they felt very abandoned. And then therefore they tend to kind of make up for that by abandoning others, and then they feel guilty about it. So as always, I think about like, you know, guilt for things we've done and guilt for things we haven't done. And I would say, you know, for the things that we have done, I would say look more towards the foo stomach, right? Stomach 40, right? Which is about resolving phlegm, actively like trying to tackle it and chew it up, to rectify it, like to put your chi into taking some kind of action to rectify it. Whereas like for things that like weren't done, like neglected to be done, like that's more about nourishing the blood and to some degree like the basic functions of the spleen. So this would be like spleen 3, spleen 6, right? Spleen 8, spleen 10. Yeah. One other thing about the earth in general, and I think it shows up a little more with spleen, is a quality of complaint. And one of the interesting things I've seen with a lot of people that I successfully treat on earth, mostly spleen, but it shows up in both people who resonate with the stomach as well as the spleen, is this feeling or this sense that like when they're talking to you, it either sounds a lot like or a little bit like a complaint. So if you are going, wow, this person's like so negative, they think they're reporting. To you, it sounds like they're complaining, but to them, they're just reporting. That's just them talking. Like you listen to them order a pizza and it sounds like they're complaining. It's really interesting. I was trying to think of like an actual example from patients, but it's like they're all just kind of like blending together right now. I haven't had enough coffee. So but everything sounds a little bit like a right? Like oh yeah, I really like the cheesecake at this one restaurant. It's so much better than that other place, you know, like and then they talk like, I this one patient, he's so funny. He comes in and he just he's like such a yang Ming, right? He's such a like stomach, large intestine. I mean, it's just like if you could go to a website called badnews.com, like he's He's the reporter. He just comes in, and as soon as he lays down, and I've been treating him for a while, he comes in for neuropathy. And as soon as he, right, a failure of chi to reach the extremities. He's not diabetic, right? So he's just like, oh man, my neighbor was out there like mowing the lawn. They didn't know what they were doing. They kept like, blah, blah, blah. And then they cut down this one bush by accident. And oh man, oh, and it's so hot. Like I went to the grocery store the other day, and oh my God, I was walking across the parking lot, and that black asphalt was just like so hot. I felt like I was going to melt. I get inside, and, this one clerk, I said, hey, you're out of blah, blah, blah. And they're like, and they didn't know where it was or when it was going to be back in stock. I mean, how can, this kid's probably like some 16-year-old person who's like stocking peaches. Like, what do they know? He's like, how can they hire? They're just not hiring the right people today. And oh my God, it's never, and it just doesn't stop until I say, okay, Hank, I'm going to let you rest for a few minutes. I'll be back in a little bit. And then he passes out, right? Because the complaining is just so exhausting. And there's this quality of damp on a mental emotional level that one experiences physically, because damp physically is a burden, right? It weighs us down, right? It requires more chi to process and move. So it's almost like adipose tissue of the mind and the body, right? So there's this sense of burdenness that often shows up in your conversations and interactions with EarthCS. Now, for some people, they were like made for burden, like, give it to me. I'm a donkey, I'm a mule, put it on my back, I'll take it, I'm good. Like, it gives me meaning, gives me purpose. I'll carry it. Like, you're probably like, Sue problem, that's me problem, right? Like, no worries, right? I got it. I'm with you. I'll carry you. Like that old, my grandmother used to have this like goofy picture. I don't know. It's just like, she was very religious, and there was this picture of like, like these two sets of footprints in the sand along the beach by, where the water laps up on the beach. And then for a while, then there's just like one set of footprints in the sand, and like, my Lord, I feel you walking with me, but boy, man, when times were tough, when I was at my worst, like there was only one set of footprints. Like, where were you? Where'd you go, man? I felt abandoned. And, Jesus is saying, no, it was then that I was carrying you. Like, that's an earth picture. You know what I mean? That's like, no, like, you felt abandoned. No, I was carrying you. Like, and that just, like, as goofy as that is, it just like touches my heart, right? And so there's this quality of like burdensomeness that just being a human being, and when we get into like CV and GV, like later on when you're in the point functions class, literally the symbol for the conception vessel shows a human being. Back in the old days it was a man, but it was a person carrying a heavy load over like a bamboo stick over their shoulders, right? So imagine like the old days where they had like the bamboo pole in, you're carrying that, and from each end is like a jugs of water. Like that's what it means to be a person. That was the symbol of like humanity. Like, man, it's a burden dealing with this thing, this spacesuit, and it's a burden. It's like hard work being a human being. It takes a lot of care and feeding, takes a lot of navigating all the craziness in your head, right? Dealing with other people, right? It's a burden. And so that's why that burden is lifted by that which does not have substance, which is your spirit, right? So with a lot of EarthCS, there's this sort of Ophelia quality of, oh, I have it so hard. It's so hard. That's like my little joke with my wife. Like sometimes when she gets overly dramatic, I'm like, it's so hard to be you. Now, of course, I don't say that, and she knows I'm joking, which which makes it okay because she knows I'm not making fun of her. But I'm just making light of the situation. I'm infusing some fire to, to illuminate the earth. But that's the, like there's a part of a lot of earth stuff that it's like, it's really hard to be me. This is a real burden to be me. It's not easy. Let me tell you how hard it is. And so that I think shows up a little more with the spleen folk than the stomach folk. The stomach folk is more chi oriented. It's like, it's kind of hard to do life. And spleen is just, it's hard to be in life. That's that whole chi blood thing, doing and being. And, in balance though, like Earth CFs are probably one of the most amazing, glorious constitutional types because they're so tuned into their needs and the needs of the people around them. And it is so, not rewarding, but like they'll make you feel really special. They'll make you feel really special when they shine the light of their integrity and caring and support and kindness onto you. They can be very altruistic. They can be very, caring and concerned and supportive. And they're like a really great person to have. When they're in balance, it's like such a great person to have in your life because they can really hold you and contain you in a way that just helps you get in touch with your own humanity and remind you of like what a gift being alive really is. Yeah. Yeah. So again, there's this, the flavor is sweet. Now, again, the odor is fragrant, right? So that what they're talking about is despite the word in English fragrant, which has sort of a positive connotation, the fragrant is like a sickly sweet, almost like the smell of vomit. Which like is kind of nauseating, like when I was in the summers, my friends and I, we used to live in Ocean City in the summer. We used to live and work out there, when we were in our teenagers. And my one friend worked at a candy kitchen, and I had a pickup truck, so I had the vehicle. So like I would generally like pick people up after work, and then and so I drive by, and like it got to the point where like I couldn't even go inside because the smell inside the candy kitchen, like especially at the end of the day when everything's just been like all the things are open, and so like there's just all this like fudge and candy and everything sweet, like just filling the air. And of course it's hermetically sealed because it's like really hot in the summer, so it's air conditioned, so they keep it closed. And it's just like this concentrated sweet smell. And oh my God, I'd walk in there and I just want to vomit. It was just like, oh my God, James, I'll meet you outside. And I just couldn't take it. So it's that kind of sweet. It's that kind of fragrant. So, but in balance, when you're in balance, it's the flavor of the harvest, where you're able to take in all of the fruits of your labors, all of the benefits of your hard work and planning, right? You're being in the dark with, and then planning, and then hard work in the fire. And then, then you are able to pick the peach and like, oh man, like I've put, my thought into this, I've planned it, I put my labor into it, I put my sweat and chi into this, I've put my Shen awareness and intention into this, and now I get to pick the peach and I eat the peach, and it's like, oh man, is that fulfilling, man, is that satisfying. That's sweet, even if it doesn't taste sweet. You know what I mean? You could be growing, I don't know, like I love growing poblano peppers, right? They're not sweet, but like, boy, when you pick that fresh off the plant and then I roast it, you know, over my flint, over my stove, gas stove, best thing ever. You know, and I roast it, it's like, oh yeah, like I'm getting the sweetness, right, of life, the richness and beauty that is fulfilling from all of my labors. So this is a theme that often shows up with earth types, where they work and work and work and work, but they never get the goods. They work and work and work and work and work, but never get the goods. They never feel nourished by, they never get the satisfaction, the satiation, the contentment that comes, right? And that's why we eat the sweet at the end of the meal, right? Because that's what you want to be left with, right? You've had your salad, then you've had your, you know, your potato, and then you've had your steak, you know, whatever, like side of whatever, you know, and then you know, you have the dessert, right? That's, which is sweet, because that encompasses all the other, in a way, like overpowers all the other flavors, right? So that's, and again, if you think about the cycle, right, you know, and then after the meal, where you kind of reflect on how great the meal was, that's the metal, right? So, you know, you go around the Shank cycle. So like, as you get older, you want, you know, you've worked hard, you want to get the goods, you want to harvest the benefits of what you've put into your life, your project, your day, you know, whatever it is, you know, your education. It's coming around that cycle where now it's about decrease and concentration, right? The harvesting, that's the power of the earth. And so one of the themes that shows up in and out of balances is, do people feel satisfied and content with what they have, with what they've done, what they've put their shen into, what they've put their chi into, what they've put their blood into, right? What they've put their jin, ye, and jing into, right? Are they getting the benefits that help them to feel content and satisfied? And so this is why a lot of people graze throughout the day, overeat, because they feel some aspect or some degree of emptiness and dissatisfaction, right? Especially now, I just feel people have more obligations, i.e. they have to give out their chi and blood and shen so much that it's hard to feel like I'm getting an equal amount back. So that's why I'm eating like a giant bowl of ice cream at 11 at night. And then that's why I gain weight. So, right. So people feel very like overly obligated, again, overly burdened. Right. And every element and official has their taxations, right? Like water can feel overwhelmed, oppressed, overpowered, right? These obligations are not just an opportunity for me to give my chi and virtues, but it's like I feel almost out of control and overpowered by them. I feel powerless in the face of them. I feel like down here and something else is up there. Or wood is like, there's so many directions to go, I don't know what direction to go. Or I'm hyper focused on that direction and like, okay, I've met the goal, what's next? I've met the goal, what next? I've met the goal, what's next, right? It's all about the goal, right? Goal oriented. And then we don't take the time to feel the satisfaction of reaching that goal. Or the fire, it's like, I must maintain connection, must maintain connection, must maintain connection, must lift my mood, must lift my mood, must lift my mood. Gotta be happy, gotta be happy, gotta be happy, right? Metal, I must strive for perfection and excellence. Or on the flip side, like, oh, we're all gonna die, it's all gonna end, like, who cares? Just let it all rot. right? So there's no satisfaction. Like we all feel our taxations, right? So, but the earth, it's about like being forced to give, forced to give, forced to give, forced to give. Okay, now I get a little. But what I get, no, that wasn't the way I wanted it, right? Like imagine like you're with your friends and they all know you love blue and you hate beige, and they all give you like this, like this beige piece of art. You're like, of something that you're like not, you've never cared about hockey in your life, and they give you like a hockey jersey. And you're like, what the hell? Like, that's not satisfying. I do not feel like you've been thoughtful, right? So this is something that really shows up a lot. And one of the ways it shows up for the people that resonate with the stomach a lot is through their speaking. And one of the ways it shows up a lot with people when their spleen is their silent feelings, right? Stomach CS will tell you they're dissatisfied. Spleen CS, less likely to tell you they're satisfied, but they'll show it on their face, but then they won't really like maybe admit it, right? Yeah, they're more internal. They feel it and they'll remember it forever. That's the blood, right? I've banked this blood and I'm banking it forever. I don't care if it turns into a lipoma or a tumor or a blood-filled cyst or endometriosis. I'm going to hang on to it. You made me uncomfortable. You hurt my feelings. I'm going to hold on to this forever. I'm never going to let it go. Right. All right. Any questions about all that?
So
Yes.
real quick on I was just thinking while you were talking, so since the stomach and the spleen have that inverse yin yang type relationship,
Mhm.
and when I think of the stomach, I think of satiety, like on a physical level, you eat something,
Right.
you feel full, you feel content, and
Yeah.
then of course you got to process it, and then I take it and go into levels of, say, on the mind level, a person is taking in information, but then they're not satisfied with that information, so they're constantly taking in more information.
Yes.
They
Yes.
don't process it, so you're still in that cycle. So
Yes.
is it safe to say that you never really reach the level of the spleen to get it in, because you stay in this cycle?
Yeah. It's because they're not harmonically connected. So it kind of like bypasses it intellectually, emotionally, where you don't really like take it in, absorb it, be nourished by it, and then transmit that nourishment physically throughout the rest of your body, psychologically, emotionally, into the other areas of your life. Right? Like it's nourished not just, my intellect, but like it's helped me in my relationships or in my professional life or in my towards this one hobby I have, right? Like you've learned to apply it to other things in your life. That's what I love about Chinese medicine. Like I tell my patients, like, it's not just a bunch of theories and practices. It like actually like has taught me how to be a better human being. So the spleen gives us the capacity to integrate it. The stomach has the capacity to process it, but I can't integrate it if it hasn't been processed. And I can't process more until I've integrated what I just ate.
I see it with manifests on mind and body spirit level.
Yeah.
With people eat food and then they emotionally eat.
Yes.
So
Right. They're
that
filling a
process.
void that can never be filled.
Mhm. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay, so we'll finish a little early today. I have uploaded my notes on the spleen and stomach in terms of like the body, mind, spirit summary of functions on the Canvas site. So take a look at those, and hopefully that can support you and assist you in doing your homework. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Take good care.